My fiancé was sleeping with my mom, so I let them get to the altar. If your fiancé cheats on you with your own mother, there are probably healthier ways to respond than putting on your wedding dress and walking straight toward him. I am aware of that. I would like that noted for the record. But by the time I found out, I was operating on approximately 3 hours of sleep, 6 cups of coffee, pure rage, and the kind of calm that only happens when your brain finally goes, oh, okay, so we're doing something insane today. My name is Rebecca. I'm 28 years old. And 2 days before my wedding, I discovered that my fiancé had been sleeping with my mother for 3 months. 3 months. Not 3 days. Not one drunken mistake. 3 freaking months. While I was planning our wedding, while my mother was helping me choose my dress, while my fiancé was kissing me goodnight, while my father was standing in church preaching about honesty in marriage and integrity. Yeah. You can see why I had a few feelings. At the moment I'm telling you this, I'm standing inside St. Mary's Cathedral in Manhattan wearing the most beautiful wedding dress I've ever owned. White silk, long train, hand-beaded sleeves, the whole ridiculous princess package. There are 200 people sitting behind me. My father is standing beside me. My mother is sitting in the front row. My fiancé is waiting at the altar, and nobody knows what's about to happen. Well, almost nobody. My father knows, and I know that's it. 2 people in an entire cathedral know that this isn't going to be a wedding. It's going to be a public demolition. My bouquet is shaking in my hands. Not because I'm nervous about marrying him. That ship sailed straight into the ocean and drowned yesterday. I'm shaking because tucked inside, those white roses are photocopies of pages from my mother's journal, the pages that prove everything. And when I look at my mother, she's sitting there in the navy blue dress she picked out months ago, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. She looks devastated, proud, emotional, like a loving mother watching her only daughter get married. Honestly, the performance is incredible. If Betrayal had an award ceremony, she'd be taking home a trophy. And my fiancé? He's standing at the altar adjusting his cufflinks. Perfect tuxedo. Perfect hair. Perfect smile. That smile used to make my stomach flip. Now it makes my stomach feel like it wants to file for divorce. He thinks I'm walking toward him because I still love him. He thinks we're about to get married. He thinks his secret is safe. And in about 5 minutes, he's going to discover that his secret has an audience. A very large audience. But before I tell you how that happened, you need to understand something. I was not some suspicious woman walking around waiting to catch her fiancé cheating. I wasn't checking his phone. I wasn't following him. I wasn't secretly convinced everyone was lying to me. I trusted people. Maybe too much. That's what they kept telling me afterward. You're too trusting, Rebecca. You always see the best in people. You give people too many chances. Which is a very cute thing to tell someone after her fiancé sleeps with her mother. Thanks. Super helpful. 3 months before the wedding, I honestly thought my life was perfect. I lived in a cozy apartment on the Upper West Side. I worked as a senior editor at Morrison & Associates Publishing. My job was basically reading other people's stories and deciding whether they were good enough to become books. I specialized in contemporary fiction, relationships, families, betrayals, messy marriages, people discovering horrible secrets about the people they loved, which is hilarious now, because I was apparently an expert on fictional betrayal and completely useless at recognizing it in my own living room. I could read 50 pages of a manuscript and say, this husband is definitely cheating, but my own fiancé could disappear for half a day and tell me he was running errands, and I'd be like, okay, babe, drive safe. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. My fiancé, Daniel, worked at one of Manhattan's biggest corporate law firms. He specialized in mergers and acquisitions. He was smart, successful, polished. He came from one of those old money families where nobody talks about money because talking about money is apparently considered tacky when your family has had it for 6 generations. We'd been together for 3 years. We didn't live together yet. That had been a mutual decision. We spent most nights together anyway, and we'd talked endlessly about buying a house in Connecticut after the wedding. I thought I knew him. I thought I knew my mother. That's the part that still gets me. My mother wasn't some distant relative I barely saw. She was my mother. She knew everything about me, my childhood fears, my favorite books, the embarrassing things I'd done in high school, the name of the boy I had a crush on when I was 12. She knew how badly I wanted a family. She knew how much Daniel meant to me. She knew every detail of our relationship. And somehow she still decided she wanted him. 3 years earlier, when Daniel proposed, I thought I'd been handed the life I'd always wanted. We were at Lincoln Center watching Swan Lake. During intermission, the lights suddenly changed. Daniel disappeared for a minute, then he came back. And before I could ask what was happening, he was down on one knee. 3-carat diamond. Theater lights. Everyone staring. People gasping. Me crying. Him crying. I said yes. Obviously. I wasn't going to say, sorry, can we circle back after intermission? I said yes. My mother cried harder than I did. She hugged Daniel so tightly that I actually laughed. I remember joking that she was acting like she was the one getting engaged. God. That memory makes me sick now, because she was hugging the man she would later sleep with. I just didn't know it yet. Wedding planning started almost immediately, and my mother took over. When I say took over, I mean this woman became a one-person wedding corporation. She had spreadsheets, multiple spreadsheets, color-coded spreadsheets. There were tabs, there were timelines, there were backup timelines. At one point, she had a 17-minute discussion with a florist about the emotional difference between 2 shades of white. I should have known something was wrong. Nobody cares that much about ivory unless something deeply sinister is happening. She chose the cathedral. She chose the flowers. She had opinions about the menu, the seating chart, the cake, the music, my dress, especially my dress. Every time I suggested something different, she'd get this strange look. Not anger, Panic. Sweetheart, trust me. I know what's best. I thought she was being controlling. I thought she was living vicariously through me. Now, I realized she was planning a wedding where her lover would marry her daughter, which is a sentence so horrifying it sounds like somebody's rejected. Daytime television script. Daniel was oddly uninterested in most of the planning. I'd ask what he thought about the table arrangements. Whatever you and your mother want. The menu? Whatever makes you happy. The flowers? Your mother has great taste. I thought he was being considerate. Turns out he was just outsourcing his fake wedding to his actual girlfriend. My mother, again. I would like to stress how insane that sentence is. At first, the signs were tiny, the kind of signs you ignore because admitting what they mean would blow up your entire life. One Thursday evening, about 2 months before the wedding, I stopped by my mother's house. Daniel's car was in the driveway. That wasn't weird. He'd been helping with wedding stuff. I walked into the kitchen, and there they were, standing close. Too close. Not kissing. Not doing anything I could point to and say, that's cheating. Just standing there with wine glasses in their hands, laughing. Except the second I walked in, they stopped. Instantly, my mother stepped backward. Daniel looked startled. And then they both started talking about the seating chart. The seating chart, of course, because apparently adultery pairs beautifully with place cards. My mother offered me wine. Daniel smiled. Everything felt normal. Except it wasn't. I noticed their eyes. They looked at each other before they looked at me. It was quick. Barely a second. But it was there. And something inside me went, Then my brain immediately went, don't be ridiculous. So I listened to my brain. Mistake number 1. A few days later, my mother served a bottle of wine from a small vineyard upstate. I had mentioned that vineyard once, months earlier, to Daniel, not to my mother. I asked how she knew I liked it. She and Daniel exchanged another look. He said I'd mentioned it recently. Maybe I had. Maybe I'd forgotten. Wedding planning had turned my brain into mashed potatoes, so I let it go. Then the phone call started. I'd call my mother and hear a man's laughter in the background. She'd say it was my father, except my father was often at church during those hours, and my father had a very distinct laugh. This wasn't him. It was Daniel. I didn't know it yet, but some part of me did. Then one Saturday afternoon, I stopped by my mother's house unexpectedly. I found her in the living room wearing a silk robe. At 3 in the afternoon, her hair was messy, her lipstick was smudged. She looked like she'd been caught doing something, which apparently she had. She jumped when she saw me. Rebecca. I called 20 minutes ago, I said. I know. I was taking a nap. A nap? Sure. At 3 in the afternoon, with 2 wine glasses on the coffee table. One with her lipstick, one without. An expensive cologne in the air. Not my father's. My father wore the same aftershave he'd probably been buying since Ronald Reagan was president. This was Daniel's cologne. I didn't know that consciously, but I knew the smell. I'd buried my face in his neck 1,000 times. I stood there thinking, no. Absolutely not. My mother started gathering the glasses. I helped her, because apparently I was still trying to be a good daughter while standing in the middle of evidence. I left. I didn't confront her. I didn't confront Daniel. Instead, I started paying attention. And once you start paying attention, you can't unsee things. Daniel started changing. He became distant. He took private calls. He stopped inviting me into his bedroom. He started canceling plans. He said he was sick. He said he needed space. He said work was overwhelming. Then one night I showed up at his apartment with Thai food. I had my key. I walked inside. He was on the phone in his bedroom. The door was closed. I waited. 20 minutes later, he came out. He looked startled. How long have you been here? 20 minutes. I brought dinner. He said he wasn't hungry. Then I noticed a wine glass on the counter. Lipstick around the rim. Deep burgundy. I didn't wear that shade. His cleaning lady didn't wear makeup. And somehow she was apparently responsible for the mystery lipstick wine glass. Because sure, that makes perfect sense. The next night, he claimed he was at a gym. The gym had closed 3 months earlier. I knew because I'd seen the article at work. Then he told me he'd been helping his mother. His mother lived in Florida. Then I found his car at his apartment after he'd told me he was uptown. Every lie was small. Every lie was stupid. And somehow I kept giving him opportunities to make sense. That was the thing. I wanted an explanation more than I wanted the truth. Then came the morning that finally scared me. I went to his apartment with bagels and coffee. I used my key. He was in his bedroom. The door was closed. I knocked. He took too long to answer. When he finally opened it, he was wearing only a towel. He blocked the doorway. I brought breakfast. I'm sick. Again? Yeah. You should probably go home. In 3 years, he'd never asked me to leave. Never. I looked past him. I couldn't see the room, but I could feel something. Something was wrong. I left. I sat in my car with the bagels beside me. And I remember thinking, who is this man? Because he didn't feel like my fiancé anymore. He felt like somebody I didn't know. 2 days before the wedding, I went to my mother's house to get the marriage documents. The rings were there. The marriage license. The family Bible. Everything we needed. My mother wasn't home. I went into her bedroom. I opened the safe. And then I saw the journal. It was sitting on her nightstand. Small. Leather-bound. Expensive. I shouldn't have touched it. I know that. I knew it then. But I touched it anyway. I opened it. First page, March 15th. He brought me flowers today. I froze. I kept reading. White tulips. Her favorite. He knew. My hands started shaking. Next entry, March 20th. The guilt is eating me alive, but I can't stop thinking about him. I sat down. Then I read the next page. He kissed me today. I think I'm falling in love with him. My heart dropped. I kept reading. Because apparently once you start reading the worst thing you've ever seen, your brain develops this horrifying need to know exactly how bad it gets. April 5th. We made love in my bed today while Rebecca was at work and her father was at the church. I stopped breathing. I actually stopped. Just sat there, staring at the sentence. Then I read it again and again. My mother, my fiancé, my bed-adjacent childhood bedroom situation, my father at church, me at work. It was all there. She wrote about him holding her afterward. She wrote about how he told her he'd never felt this way about anyone. She wrote that he said his relationship with me was comfortable, but not passionate. Comfortable? I was comfortable. Apparently I was a couch. A very expensive couch with excellent credit. Then I found the entries about the wedding. That's when I really lost it. They had discussed continuing the affair after we got married. They had planned how he would visit, family dinners, holidays, home repairs, little excuses. They were going to keep me in the middle of their relationship without me knowing. My mother wrote that I was too trusting, too innocent. She said that sometimes she felt guilty because I had no idea what was happening. Then she wrote that she couldn't give him up. I sat on her bedroom floor, the journal in my lap, and I laughed. I know. Wrong reaction. But I couldn't help it. I laughed because this was so insane that crying felt almost too normal. My mother was sleeping with my fiancé. My fiancé was planning to marry me. They were planning to keep sleeping together afterward. And my mother had documented everything like she was writing a newsletter. At some point, I started talking to myself out loud. Okay, Rebecca, congratulations. You've officially discovered the worst possible answer to every question you've ever had. I was angry. But underneath the anger was something worse. Humiliation. Because suddenly every memory had changed. Every time my mother insisted on helping with the wedding. Every time Daniel said he trusted her judgment. Every time they exchanged a look. Every time he suddenly had an excuse. All of it made sense, and I had missed it. I drove straight to a hotel. I didn't go home. I couldn't. My apartment was filled with wedding plans, his things, photos, gifts, a future I'd been building. I couldn't look at it, so I checked into a hotel under my maiden name. Then I read the journal again, 3 times. I copied the pages. I put the originals somewhere safe. I made backups, because if you're going to have your life explode, apparently you should at least organize the evidence. The next thing I did was call my father. I told him I needed to see him. When he arrived, I handed him the journal. He read it, page after page. His face changed. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just became very still. That scared me more than screaming would have. When he finished, he looked at me. How long have you known? Since yesterday. He stared at the floor. Then he asked me what I wanted to do. I told him I wanted the truth out. Publicly, he asked if I was sure. Because once you do this, there's no taking it back. I know, I told him. But they didn't give me a private choice. They made their betrayal public the moment they decided to build an entire fake future around it. My father nodded. He didn't agree because he wanted revenge. He agreed because he understood that I needed control over something. Anything. So we planned. The wedding would continue until the vows. Then my father would stop, and I would tell the truth. I called the photographer. I told him I wanted a surprise presentation at the reception. Technically, that part wasn't even a lie. It was going to be a surprise, just not the kind he expected. I prepared copies of the journal pages. I made sure there were backups. Then I wrote what I wanted to say. 3 minutes. That's what I gave myself. 3 minutes to dismantle the lie they'd spent 3 months building. The morning of the wedding, I woke up at 6, and I felt weirdly calm. My bridesmaids came over. They were excited. They thought they were helping me get ready for the happiest day of my life. One of them told me I looked radiant. I almost laughed. Radiant. Sure. I'm radiant because I'm about to emotionally carpet bomb a cathedral. My mother had chosen my hairstyle. My mother had chosen my flowers. My mother had chosen the dress. I let her have all of it. For the last time, at 11:30, my father came to get me. He looked at me. Then he said something I'll never forget. You don't have to do this. We can stop the wedding right now. I knew. I could call it off. I could tell everyone I was sick. I could disappear. But I didn't want to disappear. I wanted to walk through the front doors. I wanted them to see me. I wanted my mother to see me. I wanted Daniel to see me. I wanted them to understand that I wasn't the helpless woman they'd imagined. So I straightened my father's tie. And I told him I was ready. We drove to the cathedral. The building looked exactly like my mother had designed it. White lilies, candles, flowers everywhere. The aisle looked beautiful, which was almost offensive. 200 guests filled the pews. My mother's friends, Daniel's family, my friends, co-workers, people who had traveled across the country. Everybody smiling, everybody excited, everybody completely unaware. My mother sat in the front row. She dabbed her eyes. Daniel stood at the altar. He looked nervous. He looked happy. He looked like a man about to get married. I walked toward him. Step, step, step. My father beside me, the journal pages inside my bouquet. Every step felt strange. I wasn't walking toward my future. I was walking toward the moment I ended the lie. When I reached the altar, Daniel looked at me. He smiled. You look beautiful. I looked at him, and I thought, you have got to be kidding me. My father began the ceremony, the prayers, the readings, everything normal. Then we reached the vows. My father stopped. He looked at me, and I turned around. 200 people stared back. My hands were shaking. My voice wasn't. Thank you all for being here. People smiled. Some probably thought I was about to give a sweet little speech. Oh, bless them. Then I told them I had discovered something 2 days earlier. I pulled the pages from my bouquet. I told them they came from my mother's journal, and that they documented a 3-month affair between my mother and my fiancé. The silence was unbelievable. You could feel the entire room trying to process it. Daniel's face went white. My mother froze. Then I started reading. I read the flowers, the meetings, the lies, the affair, the plans to continue it after the wedding. I didn't embellish anything. I didn't need to. The words were already horrible enough. When I read the line about them sleeping together while I was at work, somebody gasped. When I read the part about continuing the relationship after the wedding, people started whispering. My mother stood halfway up. Rebecca. I kept reading. She tried again. Stop. I didn't. Daniel came toward me. I stepped back. He said I was making a mistake. I almost laughed. A mistake? My mistake was apparently trusting two people who should have been safe. I finished reading. Then I put the pages on the altar, and I looked at him. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? He couldn't answer. I looked at my mother. Did you really think I would protect your reputation after you destroyed mine? She was crying. I felt nothing. That surprised me. I thought I'd feel rage. Instead, I felt tired. So tired. I turned toward the congregation. I could have handled this privately. I could have canceled the wedding and let them pretend this never happened, but they planned to continue deceiving me. They planned to make me unknowingly participate in their affair. They made their choice. Now everyone knows the truth. Then I turned around and walked away. My dress dragged behind me. My father followed. Behind us, the cathedral exploded. People were standing. Phones came out. Daniel's family was arguing. My mother's friends were crying. Somebody was shouting. Someone else was asking if this was a joke. It wasn't. My mother was sobbing. Daniel was trying to explain himself, and I just kept walking. I reached the cathedral steps. The sun hit my face. I took one deep breath, and the first thought that entered my mind was, I'm starving. Seriously, after all that, my wedding had just exploded. My mother and fiancé had been exposed. 200 people had witnessed the destruction of my future, and I wanted a sandwich. I found that oddly comforting, because if I could still think about lunch, maybe I was going to survive. By that evening, videos were circulating online. People had recorded parts of the ceremony. Friends called. Strangers messaged. The story spread through our social circles. My mother's reputation collapsed. Daniel's professional life became complicated. People who had admired them suddenly wanted nothing to do with them. And me? I disappeared. I went home, packed. And within months, I moved to Portland. I took a senior editing position at a smaller publishing house. It wasn't Manhattan. It wasn't the life I'd planned. It was better. My apartment had huge windows, hardwood floors, bookshelves everywhere, and for the first time, everything was mine. I picked the furniture. I picked the plants. I picked the dishes. I bought ridiculous pillows because I liked them. Nobody told me they were too feminine. Nobody told me they didn't match. Nobody had a spreadsheet. That alone was healing. My father divorced my mother. The divorce was finalized a few months later. He eventually started seeing a woman from his congregation, a widow, kind, calm, the sort of woman who didn't apparently want to destroy his family for sport. He visited me twice in Portland. The second time, we sat in a coffee shop overlooking the river. He told me something I'll never forget. You gave me permission to admit I wasn't happy. I hadn't realized how unhappy he'd been. His marriage had been deteriorating for years. He'd stayed because he believed good people were supposed to endure. And watching my mother betray him finally forced him to admit that endurance wasn't the same thing as love. My mother contacted me. Of course she did. The first letter was 10 pages. 10 pages. I read the first paragraph. Then I stopped. It was mostly explanations. Her loneliness, her unhappiness, her feelings, her guilt, her regret. Notice what was missing. Me. I threw it away. She called on my birthday. I didn't answer. She sent photographs. Jewelry. Another letter. I donated the jewelry. I kept one photograph. It was me and my father at my college graduation. We were both smiling. No performance. No betrayal. Just happiness. I kept that one. Daniel tried harder. He called, texted, emailed. He sent mutual friends. At first, he apologized. Then he explained. Then he said the affair had just happened. Then he blamed confusion. Then he said he'd realized I was the love of his life. Then he got angry that I wouldn't respond. Then he begged again. It became a cycle. Eventually, I blocked him. His final email came 4 months after the wedding. He said he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. Maybe. But here's the thing. I wasn't responsible for making his life easier after he destroyed mine. So I deleted it. And then something strange happened. I stopped missing him. I stopped missing my mother, too. I had expected to be miserable. I thought I'd spend years wondering why I wasn't enough. Why he chose her. Why she chose him. Why I hadn't seen it. But eventually I realized something. Their affair wasn't evidence that I wasn't enough. It was evidence that they were willing to betray people they were supposed to love. That wasn't my failure. That was theirs. 1 year after the wedding that never happened, I stood in front of 300 women at a leadership conference. The speech was called Choosing Truth Over Comfort. I talked about betrayal, self-respect, boundaries, and the difference between kindness and enabling. I told them that I had once believed keeping the peace was the same thing as being a good person. It isn't. Sometimes keeping the peace just means you're the only person sacrificing. I told them I could have protected my mother. I could have protected Daniel. I could have protected their reputations. But who was protecting me? Nobody. So I finally protected myself. Afterward, women lined up to talk to me. Some had been cheated on. Some had stayed in miserable marriages. Some had spent years trying to make everyone else comfortable. They told me their stories. And I realized my story wasn't really about revenge. Not anymore. Maybe it never was. Because revenge would have meant watching them suffer and feeling satisfied. I didn't. I mostly felt detached. My mother moved to Florida. Daniel moved to Chicago. Their affair apparently lasted only a few weeks after the wedding disaster, which honestly is almost funny. They had risked everything for each other. Then reality showed up. Turns out secret romance is a lot less exciting when you're no longer sneaking around. Turns out destroying two families isn't as sexy as they imagined. Who could have predicted? I didn't care what happened to them after that. They were no longer the center of my story. I started dating again. Slowly. Very slowly. I had rules now. Clear boundaries. No excuses. No pretending I was fine when I wasn't. No letting somebody convince me that my instincts were inconvenient. The man I eventually started seeing was a literature professor. He understood that my work mattered to me. He didn't compete with it. He didn't tell me I was too intense. He didn't make me feel guilty for having standards. And he definitely didn't sleep with my mother, which apparently is now a fairly important qualification. My career took off. I was promoted, then promoted again. I started considering my own literary consulting business. I began writing a book. Not a revenge memoir, not a story about how horrible my mother and ex-fiancé were. Book about what happens when you realize the life you built isn't actually yours. About choosing yourself, about walking away, about learning that being a good person doesn't mean volunteering to be somebody else's punching bag. And sometimes, late at night, I think about the woman I was standing in that cathedral, the dress, the flowers, the journal pages hidden inside the bouquet, my father beside me, my mother pretending to cry, Daniel smiling at me, everyone believing I was walking toward my future. I wasn't. I was walking toward the end of a lie, and somehow I thought that meant my life was ending too. It wasn't. It was finally starting. That's the part I didn't understand at 28. Sometimes losing the person you thought you'd spend your life with is not the worst thing that can happen. Sometimes losing the version of yourself who kept accepting less is the best thing that can happen. I thought I had been abandoned at that altar. I hadn't. I had rescued myself there. And yes, I still have the wedding dress. It's sitting in a box in the back of my closet. I keep it because, weirdly, I don't hate it. The dress wasn't the problem. The flowers weren't the problem. The cathedral wasn't the problem. The woman wearing the dress certainly wasn't the problem. She was just a woman who trusted the wrong people. And eventually, she learned how to trust herself. So that's what I did. I stopped trying to be the perfect daughter. I stopped trying to be the perfect fiancé. I stopped trying to make everybody comfortable. I stopped confusing forgiveness with permission. I stopped believing that silence was always the mature choice. And I built a life that didn't require anybody's approval. My revenge wasn't ruining their lives. My revenge wasn't the cathedral. My revenge wasn't the journal. My revenge was waking up every morning and realizing I didn't miss the life I'd thought I wanted. I liked my life now. Actually, I loved it. And the funniest part? The woman who walked into that cathedral thinking she was about to lose everything, walked out with the one thing neither of them could take from her, herself. No husband, no perfect family, no carefully staged fairy tale, just Rebecca. And honestly, she's enough.